come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum!
Astro Radio Z is a horror, cult, exploitation film podcast by filmmakers, critics, musicians, journalists, and fans for the film obsessed. Here is your host, Derek Terry.
I dare you, Astro zombies, to listen to this podcast. Because, man alive, are we going to talk about some hijinks tonight? You read the title, Truth or Dare, A Critical Madness, Wicked Games, Screaming for Sanity, and Deadly Dares are on the docket for tonight. And I got Mark and Scott here. I don't know how they're going to be coming at me with this one, because I don't think they've seen any of these movies before. Maybe they have, maybe they haven't. But I'm a huge Tim Ritter fan from way back, and you guys know this. If you were a fan of Astro Radio Z before I took over the show, I had Tim Ritter on, and we talked. It was right around the time Deadly Dares came out. So you know my love for these movies, and this is the first time on the show we're officially going to go in deep and talk about the Truth or Dare series. So, Mark, we're coming back to the shot on video. This seems to be the year of shot on video horror here on Astro Radio Z. Scott, you've been coming back. I'm surprised we're only doing one episode with this, because this is a lot. This is a lot to cover in one episode, but we're going to try our goddamnedest to make this happen. Mark, did we bite off a little more than we could chew with this episode?
Maybe. It all depends on how deep to the elbow we want to go with some of these, which I think a couple of them we're okay with, not going, staying a little shallow. But no, I think we'll be all right. I think we can blow this through.
We can blow this. You heard it here first, folks. A new drop here on Astro Radio Z. Mark the Movie Man saying we can blow this.
We can blow this. I've got my knee pads ready, so.
I'm really extremely excited to sit here and talk about Truth or Dare, Critical Madness, and all of these movies. Tim Ritter, the director of these films, is one of the nicest dudes I have met in this underground micro-budget, no-budget horror scene. I've been in contact with him for a number of years, and he's always extremely nice and a pleasure to sit and talk to. He is a genuine fan, and you can tell watching his movies that he wears his influences on his sleeve. So tonight we are only going to be talking about 1 through 4 there is a brand new one that's going to be coming out later this year. I Dared You, Truth or Dare 5. But we'll save that for later down the road, where we'll get Tim Ritter and Scott Tepperman, co-writer, co-producer, co-director of Truth or Dare 5. But for now, we're just going to talk about the ones we can actually watch. So let's go ahead and get rid of all the pleasantries and go into the immortal Truth or Dare, A Critical Madness.
Mike Strouber, citizen of an average middle-class community in the Sun Belt. Aspiring architect. Owns a house with a pool next to a golf course. Has a pretty wife he adores and tries a little too hard to please. A wife who doesn't return the feelings.
Sure.
And is about to start a chain of events that will cause the terrifying deaths of innocent people and eventually her own.
Oh my God! Sharon! I can't believe it.
Mike.
Now, for the first time, a feature film made exclusively for the home video market first. Not for theaters, not for cable or pay TV. Peerless Films presents a first-run home video feature. Truth or Dare. A Critical Madness.
Dare.
All Mike ever wanted, as far back as he could remember, was to be noticed, to be cared for.
I dare you to slice your arm off. Dare you to put this in your mouth and blow your head off.
Now that he's gone mad, a madness so deep, so violent it defies definition and baffles the best that psychiatry offers, he's finally getting attention. A feature film made exclusively for the home video market first. Not for theaters, not for cable or pay TV. Peerless Films presents a first-run home video feature. Truth or Dare. A Critical Madness. If ever you're asked,
You want to play Truth or Dare?
tell them you've seen the movie.
Now, the synopsis for Truth or Dare Critical Madness coming from imdb.com is Mike Strauber catches his wife Sharon in bed with his best friend Jerry. He gets mad and takes off to embark on an adventure of murder and self-mutilation in demented games of Truth or Dare. Back in the day, in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, this came out in 1986, I literally saw this embossed tape cover in every single video store I walked into. Even though this is a shot on video episode along with the series that we've done, that Mark of the Movie Man and I have done all year, Truth or Dare, A Critical Madness actually was shot on 16 millimeter. Tim Ritter at the time was only 17 when he wrote this and 18 when he directed this. And for this movie to have gotten out there and to become such a cult phenomena for such a young kid is actually an insane success story. Most people still don't know what the fuck this movie is. It's still a small movie, but for those of us that are into underground sleaze and shot on video stuff, this is literally probably one of the most famous movies that there are. And Tim Ritter got a name for himself on this movie alone. Now, Mark, had you ever seen this movie prior to this episode?
No, I have not.
So, walking into this, what are your initial reactions to Truth or Dare, A Critical Madness?
Within 1 minute, we had boobs.
So it obviously is a thumbs up, 5-star, 5-stub film for Mark the Movie Man. If we're going based on the Final Cuts rating system, correct?
Yeah, actually, for shot on video, and this has been. I'm glad you're taking me on this journey because some of these, most of these I had never watched. This was one that I had seen on the shelves and seen the poster and such. And I'm just like, yeah, I never dove into it. But watching this, for the age that Tim Ritter was when he wrote this and made this is an ambitious project.
Absolutely.
It went places I didn't expect it to go. The span of time the storyline goes and the elements and the kind of twists, if you will, in the script were very surprising in a good way. They were unexpected for a shot on video, well, this case shot on film, but especially for the year it came out, I was very impressed with this first one. I'm like, wow, we're really covering a whole spectrum in here, and I was impressed. The Truth or Dare 1 really impressed me quite a bit for the film that it was, because I'm looking at this going, this is like $1 million away from being a wide release horror film in 1986.
Yeah, and surprisingly enough, straight to video fare. And it for what it is, this was originally a short film that he had shot with Joel Wynkoop. The scene in which Mike Strauber, after he's, his wife cheats on him and he kind of goes nuts, and the whole opening act of the film, he picks up a hitchhiker, this female, and goes to a campsite and plays this deadly game of Truth or Dare where each other are cutting eyeballs out and slashing open chests and all that. That scene was a literal take of the original short.
That makes sense. I actually had that in my notes, wondering if the first act was originally a short film and they just built on from there. I even had that in my notes.
Yeah, the original short came from an anthology called Twisted Illusions that Tim Ritter had made. The first film Tim Ritter made was Day of the Reaper. Then Twisted Illusions had a number of shorts in it, and Truth or Dare was one of them. And that scene is basically what the short is.
Okay. That makes sense.
So Scott, you've seen this before, right?
Yeah, I have a history with this one, and it's actually a really fond memory of mine. I had this. I saw this for the first time when I was in college. So we're talking around probably somewhere between 96 and 98, I'd say. And I had these friends, and these friends, we would always like find these movies, like movies that we thought were going to be really cheesy fun at the video store, and we would, rent them. And of course, that meant VHS back in the day. And my buddy Seth was coming back into town. He was on leave because he was in the Army, and he was one of my good friends that we always watch all these like exoteric films and everything like that. Seth was a great guy. He's the only person of the friends that would have like the big Texas Chainsaw Massacre poster in his room and everything. And he's a good guy, really talented these days, working as a DJ in Seattle now. It's really good. Anyway, he comes down to my place, and he says, no, don't even bother. I have found such an amazing movie. You have got to see this. And he takes this thing out, and it's this. Like you said, it's got the cover jumps out at you because it's got like that. What do they call it? Lenticular or whatever.
It's like an embossed cover.
An embossed cover with like silver and red, and it says "Truth or Dare: A Critical Madness." He says, "Have you ever heard of this?" Now, I was a big B movie fan, but I had to admit, like, no, I've never heard of this thing. We're watching this thing, and he's just watching my reaction. And I'm like, what the fuck am I looking at here? Because the thing takes you on such a roller coaster. It starts out and, okay, this is going to be cheesy. Just there's some overacting and stuff like that. But then there's some really like surreal bits. I mean, there's some really creepy Hitchcockian stuff in this thing.
Yeah.
That is really odd and psychological. And then after all that, so you're thinking, we're going on this kind of thought-provoking route. Makes sense. My buddy Seth is the one who introduced me to films like Ninth Configuration and stuff like that. So I know nope. Then it just goes all balls out insane and starts turning into
like a slasher film almost.
It is a slasher film, I think. But I think it becomes a slasher film, and it becomes an absolutely like crazy one with like, that really ramps up all the exploitation. It straddles like two worlds, and it's so strange how it does it that it winds up at this level. I think I kind of was concerning you with my like cryptic comments leading up to the episode where you thought that I was going to trash on this movie. I'm not. No. It reaches this level of insanity because it straddles these two things where, yeah, there's some parts of it where I'm laughing at it because it plays off so ridiculous, but
right.
but it's part of the ride, and we're watching this and we're having the best time. He's singing the theme song at the end because he loves that there's like this wonderful theme song called
I don't know. Wonderful isn't exactly how I would term the
like,
end credits.
It's like a cross between like something you'd hear in either an Officer and a Gentleman or a James Bond movie. And he's doing that, and he's like watching the credits, and he's like pointing to the the credit for the grenade guy. He's saying, "Look at that! His name is Asbestos Felt. Oh my God, his name is actually Asbestos." And yeah, the guy's name is Asbestos Felt. Was the star of Ritter's next film, which it just immediately became a big deal. I only found out that there were sequels really after hooking up with you guys, and I had never
shocking because the sequels, especially Wicked Games, I saw that tape everywhere.
I didn't see. By then I was, that was not anywhere around here, and at that point, then I just like I had meant to see them. I never got around to them. I'd seen Truth or Dare, and I have seen, as I said, Killing Spree a few times, which Derek wants me to point out is not connected to the series.
It definitely isn't, even though it literally is one of my all-time favorite low-budget exploitation horror films of all time. I love Killing Spree.
Yeah, so I've seen This was actually because I should say it, but Bizarre TV was running it a bit. This Truth or Dare. So I mean,
interesting.
So this is actually when I rewatched it for this show, it's probably the 4th time I've seen it in a year.
I don't consider that a bad thing, man. I watch it at least once a year, at least.
And it's I've seen it a bunch of times. I mean, it really stands out. And yeah, I was unaware of the sequels until a few years ago. My buddy Seth was unaware of the sequels until I just alerted him to them. So wow. This is a great educational experience and a chance to sing the praises of this movie that, yeah, I'll admit it, I laughed my ass off at it when I saw Truth or Dare Critical Madness, but it's not just because of the cheesiness, it's because the film is freaking nuts, and it's because the film is so freaking nuts that I think is why we're still talking about it more than 30 years later.
Well, it's not, I don't think it's just because it's nuts, it's also because it's oddly really well made.
It's really well made. It's well shot. It, like Mark says, it looks like a legitimate movie, like quote unquote legitimate movie.
Well, the transfers are awful, but you can tell that if this was cleaned up, because I only have the DVD, I don't have the Blu-ray, so I don't know if SRS really touched it up or not. But the transfers are awful, but you can tell that a lot of care was put into shooting this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, there's the shot early of them following a car, like on the freeway. It's like a nice, legitimate framed while the car is moving, they're filming. And, it just surprised me to see some of the shots that they did in here and the way it was edited surprised me quite a bit because, yeah, this is a solidly well-made film. I mean, the only thing that I could see that might turn some people off is maybe the lower quality of the production video part, but that's just because they were making it on a very limited budget. But everything else in this film is so solid. It surprised the hell out of me.
The soundtrack is oddly affecting, even though, if you get past the it really, like, the soundscape that's made the whole first act of this movie. And I think, Scott, you brought up a really good point, is that this film evolves with each act into a different kind of genre film. In the first act, which is Mike Strauber as this kind of naive, kind of romantic dude that it just has his world shattered. That entire first act, where once he finds out his wife is boning his friend, and he goes on this spiritual journey where he kind of connects the dots and how this had happened. For an 18-year-old to put something like this together is always blown me away, because there's a lot of nuance, even though, the acting may be a little goofy, and but the editing and the story, just how it's put together, there's a lot of nuance, and you kind of get into the headspace, which makes, when he makes the leap over into the psychological horror, which is the second act of the film, it isn't a stretch. You've been there. You know where he's going in his head. And once you flip to that psychological horror, once it finally goes to batshit crazy, I'm a masked serial killer and I'm going to kill everything in my path, you're in. Care was made towards the characters and the evolution of the plot. That is the big thing about this movie that I've always loved. Mark?
Yeah, the arc of the character is impressive. I mean, for a film like this, I mean, like you said, it surprised me the span of time, because after we get to that first act, which was a great setup. I mean, I didn't, when he's sitting there and goes, oh, you want to dare me to rip my tongue out? And he actually does. I'm like, oh shit, they went there. And then it jumps and it's 13 months later. And I'm like, wait, what?
Okay, that shit really makes me laugh. Like every time that stock photo of the mental
Yes.
institution comes up, and then the line there's like an interstitial lower third that comes by, it just okay. How many years later is this going to be?
It almost plays out like a little ticker tape news crawl with a little beep 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 on it. I'm like, that's odd.
I love that though bit because I'm like, oh, we really jumped ahead here, you know. And, yeah, you know, we watch him go through this craziness, and then all of a sudden he mutilates himself, and now he's got a mask, and I'm like, oh, okay, and and then we get that third act where he's like running over babies and shit. And I'm just like, I love it though, because it was like you were watching, you know, in this film, we're talking what, 86 here, but here is a film that isn't just giving you, boom, here's the killer, and you get the, you know, story and flashbacks. We follow this character on his journey from becoming mild-mannered Clark Kent to, you know, batshit crazy guy who's shooting people up with an Uzi. I mean, you know, it's like you actually watch the evolution of this guy to become a slasher. So it's not just a slasher movie. You're with this character, with the Strawberry character. So by the third act, yeah, you're right there. You're invested in this character, and you want to see where the hell this thing is going, because you can't predict where it's going to go. I challenge someone to, if they never seen it before, to try to predict from when he finds his wife, who was a real bitch in the beginning too, about, oh, well, you just need to get on with your life. I'm like, dude, it's been like 2 minutes since he found out.
Literally walked in and you were going to the bone zone.
Yeah, right. You know, we go from that to him being a masked killer. It was taking you on this journey that I really didn't expect, especially for that time period.
Yeah. I think one of the main things about this series that differentiates it from most of the other slashers of the era, because Tim Ritter will be the first to tell you that he is an immense fan of those 80s horror films, 70s and 80s horror films. And although he takes cues from those films, his films, at least this Truth or Dare series, focuses far more on characters and drama and the struggles of neurosis with the characters and what they're going through, and how these extreme situations break their psyche and turn them into raving lunatics. This movie, though, is it's hard to find a movie that's at one point really serious, like seriously trying to be a horror film, but then also kind of silly and kind of fun, and doesn't. I know some people really think this is a shitty film, and I don't quite get it, because every time I watch it, I'm like, damn, this is actually a really fucking good movie. But I can kind of see where people are coming from. I just don't tend to agree with that whatsoever.
I can see where they're coming from too, because I mean, it does have its flaws, but I mean, like I said, I love it for its insanity. There's sequences, especially at the beginning, where it's kind of padded out a lot. For instance, when he does catch his wife and he storms out and she says the fine thing, it follows it, and as she's standing at the door, and he runs out, he gets in his car, pulls out, drives off to the distance, and then the guy who he's with says something that is not important. Like, you could have cut that like about at least 30 seconds before you did, you know? There's a lot of stuff like that at the beginning. I can see that. I can see how people are caught off guard by the complete tonal shift in how the characters are, because one moment the characters, okay, they're kind of acting like normal people, and then all of a sudden you're in this twilight zone. I think that there's a real shift from the conclusion of the campfire scene to when it goes 12 months later in the tone. But I mean, this is part of the reason I like it, but I mean, I can see why people have problems. And it goes right around to these doctors describing can they let out because we have budget cuts, and they're always talking about people who have like murdered all their children and done all this crazy shit, people that you would never let out. I think it's perfect that the film actually goes crazy. First of all, every single one of these films, the authority figures are always horrible and they don't behave like human beings.
No.
So obviously, I think Ritter, never having met the man, Ritter actually seems to have some issues and maybe even making some statements about authority figures, I think. Because, I mean, it's just so beyond the pale how they behave in this movie. And this is right that this should be like where the film turns, because isn't this the way what we always think when we see like a slasher film or some crazed killer film, and then he's locked up. He hasn't technically killed anybody at this point. He's locked up, and then they have a thing like, well, maybe we can let him go. But in real life, you're like, there's no freaking way in hell he would be let go.
No, it was because they had budget cutbacks and they needed to transfer people. And he's like, well, the one goes like, well, maybe we could let him go. I mean, is he really rehabilitated? And they're like, well, no. Well, why not? And he immediately goes to kill his wife, like immediately.
Yeah, I mean, it's outside of the realm of reality, but I think that at that point the entire film is outside the realm of reality, so it's fine. because I think by that point, it's like, oh, it's not just this guy that's crazy. The rest of the world has to be crazy as well in order for this man to still be walking free. You know?
Yeah, I think really the only thing for me that doesn't work is that it just ends.
Yeah.
Like there's no real conclusion to the film. It just all of a sudden we get that cold stock still of the hospital, and we think, oh, here's another 6 months down the road. Nope. Then all of a sudden we're here, oh, I've got the critical madness.
Oh, that's a lovely singing voice there you got, Derek.
You do that well.
It's I'm gonna call the Metropolitan Opera like right now.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, those they're much better than my pipes, I can tell you that much. So, but yeah, I mean, it's like, it's just yeah, I mean, it does just end. The ending also never quite made sense to me, which I guess is appropriate since the second one, the ending doesn't make sense either to me. But but the first one, because are we covering the ending now or?
We can cover whatever we want, Scott.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, all right. Wild West time. Awesome. Here we go. Well, I mean, it's because, and nothing is logical in this movie at all. But I mean, even I was like, come on, wait, how? Because the deal is that he's going to kill his wife. It takes them the whole movie to realize he might be going to kill his wife when he has already tried to kill his wife. I mean, this is something that he already tried to do. So, of course that's going to be where he's going again. And so he's approaching the shower or something like that, or he's going to catch the wife, as she's going to get into the shower. And no, it was the cops waiting for him all along. Boom, boom, boom. We got him, or something like that. If I'm remembering it correctly, I don't know.
Yeah, the cop is actually in the shower, like we're setting up a psycho sequence.
Yeah, it's like a psycho sequence and stuff like that, and it kind of little riff on Nighthawks also. And I'm like, okay, great. And then he finds it says like had the woman waiting, I guess plucked her right out of the shower and had her wait in the closet, and she got out and she's dead in the closet. I never got that. Like, wait, how did he kill her he killed her in the closet and just shoved her back in there before?
And then decided he was going to go and kill her again in the shower? Or
in the shower? It made no sense to me. I don't get it. I was like, wait. Movie, I've forgiven you I've been really lenient with you, movie.
Yeah. Well,
I forgive you a lot.
If you were going to sit and talk to Tim about this movie in particular, because of his age, the producers did not trust him. Mm-hmm. He had a lot of trouble with certain aspects of creating this film because of the money that was involved. The producers were constantly butting heads with him in order to like undermine and take over the entire film. And they recut some certain stuff. And I mean, if you go back, if you listeners, you go to astroradiozpodcast.com, go to the past episodes, go to the bottom, go to the Astro Radio Z classic episodes, the Tim Ritter interview I did, I believe, holy shit, it's already been 4 years.
It was an early one because
2013 or 2013. Holy shit. He goes through a bunch of that. Or you can even listen to a commentary, I believe he's done about it, where he sits and talks about, you know, unfortunately, because of my age, I couldn't really fight back on a lot of this stuff. So some of the film is a little disjointed, and isn't really Tim's fault. So, Mark, what did you think of how this ended?
It was a bit odd. The last couple minutes, I was, fully into it. And this third act really plays out like almost like a crazy, 80s horror action film hybrid. I'm like, holy shit, they actually got a guy burning on, guy on fire. I'm like, wow, okay, I didn't expect that stunt, and then we get into this final sequence of like the last 3 or 4 minutes. And I was like, that was odd. Yeah. Okay, she was in the closet. When did he get to kill her first? Though the closet wasn't in the bathroom. The closet is actually, I think, in another part of the house.
It is. Yeah, you're correct.
So that part I kind of pieced together. The way it was cut, the way it was put together, it felt almost like that closet was right near the bathroom. But when I watched it at first, it didn't make, and I'm like, oh wait, the closet's in another part of the house. And then they kind of give it a almost, lack of a better term, a Hollywood ending. It was a bit abrupt, and it felt, up until that point, it hadn't felt really cliche. It was just off the rails. And then all of a sudden it kind of hit this beat for beat standard 80s horror ending. And I'm like, oh, didn't quite expect it to end like that. I was thinking of something a little more out there. And instead we kind of get that. And now that makes sense that you were saying he was butting heads with producers, because the ending felt a lot more standard.
Well, it also feels very abrupt. Like, it doesn't feel like it's the end. It feels like we were going to get at least another 5 to 10 minutes of this movie. Yeah.
Well, it is abrupt. And you don't get any follow through after seeing some legs walk past and you're like, oh, we're done.
And as and to be fair, by that point, as I've said, the film has really gone off the rails. It's really gone full crazy. I mean, we've actually watched a, police officer not check that he actually has the killer cornered in like an outhouse or something or other, or a shed.
Oh yeah,
firing it wildly into the shed, setting it on fire. And then it turns out, oh no, he actually killed an innocent guy. It's actually this bomb there, which they were able to piece together right away because they can do dental records right at the scene.
Yeah, it was just a skeleton, a charred skeleton. Well, obviously, this is the local drunk bum. He must have passed out in here.
How do you know that? Exactly. By that point, we've already seen that. So when I say like that, the ending didn't make sense. I mean, it didn't make sense in a slightly bigger way than the rest of the movie doesn't make sense. And again, it's part like I'm so nice to this movie because let's face it,
charming, dude. This movie
it's so charming. If this was a $10 million, completely, thought out and we planned everything possible so we could reach the widest audience possible, and it played off shit like this, I'd condemn it because it was crass and it was crude. This one, I loved the spirit of it, so I mean it works for this, so I liked it a lot.
I think a lot can be said about these really small micro budget films back in the late 80s, early 90s, is that, and we've said this before on these shot on video episodes, is that you can feel the passion in these movies. And it's very rare that you find one that, even though it is a little wonky at times, you rarely find one that hits on all cylinders the way Truth or Dare: A Critical Madness does. It is seriously one of my favorite movies. When I was a kid, when this came out, I was 9 years old. That's dating me, so you can figure out, do the math. And I saw this tape every time my dad would take me to the hardware store. I would walk into this hardware store, and they had a little tiny video section, and they had Truth or Dare: Critical Madness there. Now, obviously, at 9 years old, my dad wasn't going to be renting me Truth or Dare: Critical Madness. But I remember looking at that tape cover, that VHS cover, that embossed silver and the blood with the razor, and you turn on the back and there's explosions and there's a dude with the copper mask. And I was just like, fuck, I need to see this movie. And when I finally did, I watched it a ton because it's a fun movie. So let's go ahead and let's wrap up Truth or Dare: Critical Madness, and let's give our thumbs up, thumbs down. Mark the Movie Man, ultimately, final thoughts. How'd you come out on this?
Oh, thumbs up, definitely. Especially for shot on video, time it came out, everything behind it. Yeah, thumbs up. It should be watched by anyone who's into the micro budget stuff and want to see how early stuff like this was made. Yeah, check it out.
Scott Davis.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I said, you not everybody is going to dig this. Some people are going to grow really impatient really fast. But for me, I thought it straddles this line between actually being really clever and really psychological and just being so balls out insane. That's the thing and I love films that go that crazy. I dig this one quite a bit. So definitely a thumbs up for me.
Dude, this is the movie that made me a lifelong Tim Ritter fan. After this movie and reading about him in Fangoria, It Came from the Underground, I subsequently went on to watch and look forward to every one of his films, from Killing Spree to Creep to Wicked Games to all of them, man. This is the movie that started my obsession with really micro budget, low budget direct to video stuff. So let's go ahead and move forward, and let's talk about Wicked Games from 1994, which is Truth or Dare 2.
In the summer of 1992, I began to make plans for making the sequel to Truth or Dare: A Critical Madness. Unfortunately, I couldn't call it Truth or Dare 2, for Madonna had stolen the title for a 1991 concert film. This sequel merely mines the same territory as Truth or Dare and has a new set of characters that respond to similar circumstances. The common link in the movies is the Copper Mask Killer, whom I've dubbed the Avenger of Lost Loves.
Now, Mark, do you think you can explain what the plot of Wicked Games is?
Um,
Do you want to try it?
oh wow. Okay. Sure. There's. Whew, okay. There's killings going on once again in Sunnyvale. These killings are very familiar to the killings that were happening at the end of Truth or Dare 1, but people are wondering, how is that possible? And so once again, a lot of people think our favorite guy with the copper mask is out and killing, but dun dun dun, there may be more than meets the eye to these deaths. As these brutal deaths, the body counts rise, and people are wondering just who is committing these murders. And as the movie plays out, we find out that there is truly more behind the mask than what we originally thought.
Wow, Mark. Talk about not giving anything away with, with that synopsis. That's
Sorry.
actually a really good one. That's cool.
Sorry, I force a habit with doing synopsis for my movie review show. I try not to give much away, so I apologize.
Good job, dude. That's awesome. Wicked Games, obviously 1994, came out almost 10 years later. Immediately will slap most fans of the first film right across the face.
With
If
boobs.
you aren't ready for extremely low grade video stock, you are going to hate Wicked Games. Now, I don't hate Wicked Games because if you get past the shortcomings and limitations of the video stock and the budget, you will find one of the most batshit strange, deranged, sadistic, weird, sexually deviant films that's come out of the underground. This film is as bonkers as the first one, if not more bonkers than the first one. The first film had long stay actor of Tim Ritter's films, Joel Wynkoop, in a very small supporting role as kind of a helper in the mental institution. This film, Joel Wynkoop plays a detective named Dan, whose friend Gary, not unlike Mike Strauber from part one, walks in on his wife boning his best friend. Now, Dan decides to let Gary, for the time being, come in and stay with him while he tries to figure out what he's going to do with his life. Dan slowly starts to notice that Gary is becoming unraveled. Now, every last character in this movie is sexually deviant in some way.
Yeah.
And it seems to be one of the major themes that goes on in this very disjointed, very dark film. Scott, what did you think of how dark this movie was compared to the first one?
You know, and there was like a lot of there was some of the craziness like there was in the first one, but I think that because I guess building on the reputation stuff, and he had done other like crazy type films, there's more attention paid to the psychological aspect of it all the way throughout the film, and everybody is somehow like you say, a sexual deviant somehow, which was really intriguing to me. It actually kind of reminded me of a screenplay I wrote long time ago, where it was involving this person that was trying to protect this woman from a stalker, but the person that's protecting her is also a serial killer, and which is like the type of thing you come up when you just say, yeah, this will be a good idea. I think I'll put in all my ideas into the movie. And I think that that's what Ritter was doing with a lot of these movies, is that when it comes time to make a sequel, a lot of times you think, oh, I could do this, or I could do this, or I could do this. And he said, oh, I could do this. I could do this. I could do. Yes, I'm going to do all of that. And that's what he did here. So, I mean, it is bonkers, but it's bonkers in a different way. It's bonkers in actually ratcheting up what a weird psychological horror film it is, which is not to say it doesn't have plenty of goofy bits with scantily clad women and like ridiculous setups and what have you. It's just that I think that this is much more of a dark psychosexual film than the first one.
Absolutely. I mean, right off the bat, it starts off with the scene in which Gary walks in on his wife, who's boning his best friend, and he literally at gunpoint makes them finish while he watches. Mark, what did you think of this?
Yeah, it opens up a lot darker, and I'm like, oh man, he didn't actually kill him, which then puts you into what's wrong with the mullet man. It
is a glorious mullet.
It was needed its own credit, I think, because it was fantastic. But yeah, it starts off dark, and then he's spending that night at his friends, and they have the suicide sequence, and then you're just like, oh, okay, this is gonna be a different film than the first one. I'm like, but and then you think about it for a minute. Well, how does this all tie together? And then when you start seeing the copper masky, and you're like, okay, though I did kind of pick up on the twist only because the hairstyles changed with the guy.
That's one of the main things that ruins the entire end of this movie. And in subsequent sequels, they would fix that by making Copper face actually wear a ski mask under. Right. So that you couldn't tell whose hair it was.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, because I kind of picked up real quick after the second. I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of see where it was going. I wasn't quite sure who it was.
Joel Wynkoop the entire time. Every kill was Joel Wynkoop.
But I didn't.
Yeah, I was noticing that. I was noticing that too, as a way to, and I thought that was a way to pinpoint who the killer really was, or something. Kind of like, but. Like you say, it's always played the same guy, so it's a cheat, and he does a few cheats in this movie like that. There's another sequence, if you don't mind me skipping around. One of the people that is obviously unhinged is a psychologist who is in bed with this woman and everything like that, and you think that he's talking about this person and and she's going to make him pay for sex, and she's doing all this stuff, and he's in bed with this woman, and then it cuts to a wider shot, and you see that he's actually in bed with a mannequin. Well, yes, but the close-up wasn't so close that you couldn't tell that it was a woman in the bed with a completely, with blonde hair instead of dark hair and everything like that he was talking to. But when it went to a wide shot, it was somebody different. So you're like, okay, so do we chalk this up as that he was hallucinating that it was this woman with the blonde hair? Or was that just kind of a little cheat, about to throw the audience off, which is what he does, I think, by having the killer always be the Joel Wynkoop every time he's on, but there's always question about, well, wait, but seriously, who is the killer? There's lots of things that did that. If you go back to Basic Instinct, I haven't seen that in 20 years, so it's hard to remember, but I distinctly remember trying to see, okay, if I look at the beginning scene and look at the woman's breasts, I'll be able
to use my Batman-like detective skills on these breasts.
I'll be able to tell, is that Sharon Stone's breast, or are they the breasts of her friend? I remember doing this back in the day, and it turned out that oh no, actually, because their breasts are so similar in the movie, you can't tell. Shit, you got me again, Verhoeven.
I've been foiled by these tits.
Damn you, you crafty Dutch madman! And
it's a mystery, Scoob. I don't remember that episode of Scooby-Doo. And the real killer rips off the shirt. Oh, damn, I can't
Wait.
tell. Hold on. Come here, Velma. Rip. No, come here, Dad. I can't tell.
The titties all look alike.
Well, it was kind of a similar thing, except this is like one of the only parts of the movie where tits don't play a factor, and that you would be looking at this. You know, everybody has their own like hang up in this movie, and it's always like a sexual hang up. It's always about women. This is kind of going to a lot of the themes of this. It's so much that it does actually make you a little bit uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And like how you
that is the point. I think it really is that, well, kind of like we had talked a number of episodes ago when we were doing the John Waters episodes about A Dirty Shame, and that movie is directly speaking about the fact that everybody in their own way is sexually deviant and has their own kinks and their own preferences and their own things going on that they don't reveal to society. This film speaks to that exact same thing, but not done in a comedy way. It speaks to the fact that repression of sex sometimes leads to people having neurosis about these sexual things, these things that they get, these kinks that they get so deeply involved in that it consumes their entire lives. And most of the time, not in a good way.
Well, yes, but also like it also like is how it paints women basically.
Oh yeah,
because all the people we are focused on are men, and the way that because they are so messed up, or the way that all these people view women, whether they're supposed to be the killers or the heroes or whatever you think they are, I'm being vague too. It paints it with a like a brush, like yeah, but every single one of these people hates women somehow.
Yeah.
Well, they feel like they've been victimized.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they feel like women are all cheaters. They're all backstabbers. They're all whores. They're all these horrible things, and so the movie is always forcing you to see life through one of their sets of eyes, and like I said, that makes it really uncomfortable to watch, at times.
Well, you even get the boyfriend in there who's not part of kind of the three main male characters we end up following. We get the one boyfriend in there who's jealous because his girlfriend has the hots for our serial killer. She wants to marry him.
Right.
And, the boyfriend's jealous because she's like, well, she wants him to like dress up like the boy, like the serial killer.
That was the next one, wasn't it?
Or is that the next one? Or is that this one? Maybe I got the two mixed up.
I think you got the two mixed up. I believe that's Screaming for Sanity.
I thought I blacked out for a second there. Like,
My apologies.
Well, that is something that would have been. That is something that would have been directly in line with Wicked Games, and there are themes that run through every single one of these movies. And I think sexuality and repression and the way sex is used as a weapon is a theme that runs through all of these movies.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, that is in the next one. I kind of crossed the two. This one had the three hookers getting killed.
Right.
That's right. This is, and it has one of my most favorite deaths in it, though.
Are you talking about the sprinkler?
Yes. I love the bloody,
Talk about it, Mark.
I love the bloody sprinkler. Well, our copper mask killer goes in, and he takes out this one female, and he throws her down on the lawn, and it's got one of those sprinklers that pop up when the water starts going through it. And it was popped up, and she falls on it. And as she's sitting there dying, the blood starts shooting out of the sprinkler head. Like, so you got this blood just spurting everywhere. And it was just an amazing sequence, the way they did that. I'm sitting here in my mind going, that's pretty freaking cool. How the hell they do that?
Yeah, it's a great special effect. And on top of that, I think, all of the killings in this movie, even though it's obvious it's Joel Wynkoop the entire time, even though if you watch the movie, it's very obvious who was the killer for the most part. But the way that Copper Mask is shown as this kind of like almost like a Jason character.
Yep.
Through this movie, one thing that always unnerved me, and some people would disagree and think it's kind of hokey, whatnot, was every time Copper Mask is killing someone, you hear this really affected voice going, "Die, die," and I when combined with the music and everything, I think that shit is so creepy. It's so fucking creepy. Scott, what do you think about the deaths in Copper Mask in this thing?
I think the die definitely worked here. I mean, I think it was effective and everything like that. I think that, like you mentioned I think you mentioned the soundscape of the previous film. I think that continued. I mean, obviously he was dealing with budgets that were less, as things went on, the 90s. I was able to listen to some of the Tim Ritter interview. I did not make it all the way through, unfortunately, because I was away for a few days. But he had mentioned that the 90s were kind of a lean period for video production and such. And I know that the part 4 had a very low budget. I think that you were talking about, he did a lot with what he had. And part of that was the soundscape. Part of it was that the effects were always good, and even when the effects in certain movies weren't good, they were always disarming, so that they shook you. I mean, they weren't something that just happened. I've seen people try to do shot on video slasher homages just in the last few years, and what do? They take like a craft services knife, kind of similar to what they did in the witchcraft movies, and they basically just stab random people and have them fall down and clutch their chest and maybe like gurgle up some blood. And you forget about it as soon as it's happened.
It's lazy. It's lazy.
These they catch you right away. He knows exactly what he's doing. He says, yeah, truth or dare. People loved this because it was so nuts and everything like that, but he's also exploring these themes. He continues to explore the themes while having these absolutely insane effects, and I can totally see how someone could watch one of these movies, and I don't know why I didn't do it myself until now, but would want to say I wonder what he's going to come up with for his next movie. And not in the same way as the Friday the 13th films, but kind of on this more I'm just so impressed he can do this with what he has.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And he did that here. I'm going to tell you right now, I like this movie better than the first one. I think this was a really well done movie. Even though I have to admit, in the last 5 minutes of the movie, I have no idea what the hell's going on.
Well, let's go ahead and let's talk about the last 5 minutes of this movie, where it basically kind of flips the bird to the story as almost as if it was a fever dream of Mike Strauber in the mental institution. And the three main characters who we go through this entire revelation sequence at the fire pit from part 1, where they all basically admit that they were the killers.
Everybody was the killer. Yeah.
Everyone was the killer. And in the end just kind of ends on this, where the three main characters who we've known to be a psychologist and 2 cops turn out to all be clinical doctors.
That just threw me, because I'm like, wait, why are they calling them doctors when they were cops? And now that you mentioned that it could be a fever dream of Strawberry, that makes sense now. I didn't pick up on that at the end, though. That end, again, with the ending, kind of confused me a little, going, wait, huh?
Well, it also would explain a lot of the psychosexual things that are going on in the film.
Right.
Because Mike Strauber obviously has very acute hang-ups about sex due to the first film.
Right. And I thought that, when I saw that, I'm like, oh, it was all this, none of this really happened, which would, again, in certain movies would piss me off. Here, because of the weird twisty, turny nature of it, it works. But I'm like, but what confused me was, I was like, was this a fantasy of Mike Strauber where he imagined his doctors were these killers? Or was it one of the doctors imagining it, or was it all of the doctors kind of in their own way imagining it? I couldn't know whose twisted head have I been in throughout this whole movie. What was getting me.
Or how about it's none of them? How about if it was the woman enters the room, if it was in her head?
I don't know. That one seems the biggest stretch of them all.
I know that's a stretch, but
it is a stretch. But honestly, I don't know how you could really say anything is too much of a stretch.
Right. It's true.
I'll be honest with you.
I think if anything, going into this, for the layman that is just a general horror fan, they have an upward hill climb to face. They have to put up with a very low budget, with a film stock that isn't necessarily sexy to look at, and also a very non-linear story.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can get past those things, I don't think this is better than part one, but I do feel it's close. It's really close. It definitely takes way more chances.
It's a more interesting movie. It's a more intriguing movie. The other one, I mean, yeah, it's impressive. Like I say, it's got a special place in my heart. It's really bonkers. But this one, I'm like, just looking at the themes of the movie and looking at how you had to be in these people's heads and stuff like that. And it's a more disturbing film. It's a more interesting film to me than the first one.
It shows the maturity. Like, it shows the evolution of a filmmaker. Like, he's trying new things. He's not just remaking the film again.
I mean, there's still kooky stuff going on here. There's this great sequence with this one woman, and she's doing a strip tease, and they have a TV on in the background. And I swear to God, it looks like they were watching scrambled porn on the TV, because it's just a old scrambled analog picture like you'd get if you tried to tune in on a cable channel that you weren't allowed to get. But I mean, it's just, but I mean, so there's kooky stuff in it, but it does show a certain maturity just in the themes and everything on this. It was just really intriguing to see where he was going with this movie.
Yeah, it's really out there. They did remake this. Well, I don't know if I could say remake. Tim introduced to me, when I was in contact with him about Truth or Dare 4, introduced me to and sent me a remix re-edit of this film called Wicked Games Snuff Edition.
Oh.
In which a fan took this movie and took a bunch of industrial, prototypical, early 90s industrial type music, kind of like the stuff we saw and heard in the Gore Horror series, and then remixed this movie using the original elements of the film. Some of the effects work is elongated, and it's non-linear. It's more of kind of a music video for about 90 minutes. But it really changes the perception of what the theme of this movie was and how really dark this movie is when you watch the original version of it. So if any of you listeners out there are interested in this, definitely watch the original version of Wicked Games, which you can find on DVD for relatively cheap. And I believe Ron Bonk put this out on SRS on Blu-ray.
Yeah, there's all four. He's got a set that's all the whole series, I think, on Blu-ray.
Okay, cool. Awesome. That's awesome. But definitely, I would, just for curiosity's sake, check out Snuff Edition. It's a weird remix that is more, it's kind of a thing you put on the background at parties. But if, as a fan of this film and this series, it really takes the darkness of this film and ratchets it up to 20. It is a creepy fucking version of this movie. But regardless, let's push past that. And let's go ahead and give our final thoughts on Wicked Games. Mark, how did you come out on Wicked Games?
Again, it was a surprise. It was a darker film. I did like the story. I liked it wasn't a rehash and the kind of a little bit of surrealism to it. You can see things were learned from the first one to this one as far as the storytelling goes, because things felt a little bit tighter in this one than in the first one. So yeah, I mean, you watched the first one, definitely check this one out, because it's not just a rehash of the first one. It's actually its own standalone movie, and yet it works into this mythology that he's building of the Copperface.
I think that the ending will definitely not make any sense if you didn't watch the first film.
Yeah, agreed. Completely.
Scott?
Yeah, I mean, it's got kooky bits to this thing. It's got goofy bits to it. There's even a riff that also makes no sense and is kind of stupid silly. On the shower scene we were talking about in the first film, there's a riff on that where they kind of turn that one around. But yeah, it's like I said, I think that this is it's a more interesting film. You're not going to get a shot of like a car like mowing down a baby carriage in this one, but you're going to get some like kind of a weird psychosexual kink shot on video, really low budget film that has a lot of dopey, goofy bits, but also has a little bit going on underneath the surface. I think that if he had inspiration from some Hitchcockian things, as I said in the first film, he had a lot of De Palma going on, inspiration going on in this film.
Yeah,
the way it goes with the twists, the turns, the not knowing if what you're seeing is reality or not, and also having all the kinks and hang-ups in several of the characters along the way. I think Wicked Games was a really interesting movie. I recommend it.
Yeah, for a low budget, no budget film, it is insanely interesting. And we didn't talk about, I just want to end this on the new version of the Copper Mask in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Was that cool as shit or what?
Yeah, I dug the little bit more streamlined look to it, giving you the idea, no, this isn't, you knew it wasn't going to be Strawberry, but I liked that. I liked that it was, I liked the new mask quite a bit.
Scott, did you like the new mask?
It's fine. I'll be honest with you. I mean, I noticed it was a new mask, and I think I kind of liked it a little better, but I would be lying if I said I gave a whole lot of thought to it, honestly. So,
well, it's not really the centerpiece of the film.
No, but I mean, it's, I don't know, it's all right. I mean, I guess the first one, and finding out that where they were coming from on the first one. The first one's mask did look really clunky and blocky, which actually kind of helped the look of that film, because if you ask me, that look of the film, even though it's shot on 16 and everything like that, it's everything in there is like the ugliest, most boring brown beige shit you'd ever see in the 80s in that first movie. I mean, it's really blocky, ugly stuff in that first movie. That's kind of the look of that film. And so that mask went along with it. This one kind of went along with like, hey, it's the 90s now. Good news. No more Reagan Bush. Here we go. We got a new slicker mask going on here as we, molest and murder all these unsuspecting women that we think have done wrong.
Right. Well, that mask, I think the mask of this movie and the subsequent movies is angry looking and tough. I love this Copper Mask in this movie, and moving on to Truth or Dare 3, where it'll move over there as well. So let's go ahead and let's move on to 1998's Screaming for Sanity, Truth or Dare 3.
Some feelings of hate and rage never die. The beast is back. Screaming for sanity. Truth or Dare, Part 3.
Now, Scott, would you please tell my listeners what is the plot of Part 3?
Oh, well, let me think here. Okay, remember how in the first movie, anybody who's seen that, there's a sequence in which Mike is going on his killing spree, and probably one of the craziest money shot things that has nothing to do with the story. He just mows through a woman and her baby, she's like pushing this baby in a baby carriage, and he mows them both down and backs over them, and it's really bloody and shocking, and you can't believe what you've just seen, and it has nothing to do with this film. It's totally gratuitous. Well, now it has actually something to do with the film, because we now have catch up with the husband that was the husband of the woman and the father of the kid, supposedly, who ever since then, like 12 years ago, has been kind of nuts and kind of dealing with all these feelings, and he's hallucinated and doesn't know how to, is having trouble dealing with what happened all those years ago. And he's finally being set free. But as he is set free, he starts getting visions of his dead wife, who says that the only way to make this right is to take revenge on all these people who are suddenly becoming rich off the Truth or Dare killings from the first film. People who are, making money by exploiting the true crime market and selling serial killer memorabilia. People who are in love with the serial killer idea, and people who are like writing books and making movies and whatnot. You can't let them exploit this way. You have to take them out. And I dare you to put on the mask. That's one of the two stories going on in this movie. The other being that we catch up with Joel Wynkoop once again, this time still in his doctor role from the last movie. In fact, the movie actually picks up from the last scene of the movie. He has been disbarred for physically abusing Mike Strover in sanitarium or whatever, and he is having trouble trying to come to grips with that, and he might be losing his sanity as well. So it's a thing about, will his sanity hold out, and will he be able to reach out to this new killer in time? That's what I can come up with.
Oh, it's absolutely what this movie's about. And this movie beats Rob Zombie to the punch of Halloween 2 by almost a decade. Because the fact that this film now takes a step outside of the really deeply psychological bent of Part 2 and Part 1 and starts to include the outside world into this really insular story that we've been kind of dealing with up until now. Don't take that as me saying that there still isn't a bunch of really weird, surreal, like introspective things and sexually deviant things that are definite holdovers from the last film. This is kind of like Screaming for Sanity, to me, is kind of like a pairing of the first two films. Like for my buck, this is probably my least favorite of the series, just because it doesn't seem to know at times what it wants to be. Does it want to be this really weird, surreal, dark movie? Does it want to be a really plot heavy, story first kind of ABC type horror film and police procedural? Or does it want to be a slasher film? Like, I think Screaming for Sanity, if you were going to say anything about it, is kind of confused. Did you kind of get that impression, Mark?
Yeah, I did kind of in this one. It didn't feel quite as, I mean, I'll put it right on. I still enjoyed it, but yeah, it did seem a little bit less of knowing where it wanted to go. And so, and like I said, what threw me again was the fact that we have a detective now, the doctor, which I didn't quite understand at the beginning. And I marathoned these. So watching them back to back, it kind of threw me for a little bit going, wait, oh, okay, he's a doctor now. You know, I like the message and the story going on behind it, but it did feel just a bit less focus. And yeah, you get these darker moments, but then you get the memorabilia guy's death, which, you know, kind of feels like Pee Wee Herman's death Paul Rubin's death in Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah.
You know, you
Drop an Alka-Seltzer in his mouth and just let him roll around on the floor a little bit.
You know, and you think he's dead, and then, oh no, wait, no, he's a hard guy to kill. You know, I did like, you know, and you get the little humor bits like that we had a little bit more, I would say, in the first one than we did the second one. So yeah, it felt a little less focused on what kind of film it really wanted to be. You know, I still enjoyed it, but yeah, of the three, this one felt a little bit looser, like not quite as tight as the other two.
Yeah, there was a lot going on in this movie. There was just so many diverging stories where Wicked Games, even though it was disjointed and nonlinear and we were following like 4 or 5 characters, there was really like 2 or 3 different stories going on in this. But you hang out with one character for so long, you think, okay, well, this is what the movie's going to be. And then it just tonally shifts on a dime. And that didn't work as well for me with this movie. I like this movie as well because I think there are certain sequences, mostly with the father and his kind of like descent into madness, where the only way he feels anything is to have hookers come by his room and cut him up.
Well, he also has them. The poor ladies have to dance through a strobe, which kind of was seizure-inducing. But other than that, yeah, it was really creepy. You still had that sexual deviance from 2, but then, you know, you'd get a kind of a joke where he grabs Jack the Ripper's coat, and, you know, so it adds a little humor like in 1. And yeah, you feel for the dad. I really kind of wish it would have stuck just with the dad, because I thought that story was interesting.
Yeah, I think, you know, the whole Joel Wynkoop character is a little underbaked. Scott, what do you think about any of this?
I disagree. I didn't think it was quite as good as the last one. I think that it kind of, comparing it to a genre that is as far removed from this as possible, it's kind of like those superhero sequels. Like whenever they would do another Batman movie back in the day, they would always add characters to it. And so it's like, okay, we got the Joker, great. Okay, well now we got Catwoman and the Penguin. Okay. And then we got the Riddler and Two-Face and Robin, and then we've got, you know, all them plus Batgirl plus Mr. Freeze plus this plus Bane plus Poison, and it kind of falls under its weight. I don't think this movie is quite there, but you could kind of see it, that it was just kind of expanding from the varying storylines of what he was exploring with the last film, and he was kind of expanding that even more. And I think it was teetering the edge. I will say that it was teetering the edge of getting weighted down by that. And but right now, I thought it was. I still think this was an effective movie. There's the thing is that it would change the tone in mid-scene.
Yeah,
and I can see that a problem. Let's all just say it right now. The biggest laugh of the movie. You have this character and you're following him. My God, can you even imagine a tragedy like this man is dealing with? That his, wife and kid were just taken out, by this killer, and now you have to watch every day as these people are becoming famous and stuff. I don't think. It does predate Halloween too, but let's also think that he's also touching upon themes that were prevalent in that day, by the way, of
absolutely.
Charlie Manson was, they were releasing his CD at this time. Axl Rose was wearing him on a shirt in the early 90s and covering his music. Natural Born Killers came out like a couple years before this came out. So, but in this scene, like, you're dealing with this guy who's dealt with all this stuff, and then he has to watch the people become famous and everything like that. And what's he see? He looks in the baby carriage. He sees this like hilarious looking mangled baby.
Oh,
you killed me, Daddy. Blah, 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 blah. And it does like this extreme zoom on it. Come on, guys. Biggest laugh of the movie. I just about fell out of my chair. I was like laughing so hard.
It's one of those things, Scott, where I think, you know what you're getting into just from frame one because of the video stock alone. So stuff like that doesn't bother me as much as it would if this was shot on film. That would be like, well, what the fuck is that?
No, so it has that kind of craziness and stuff like that. Whereas before, we would see these movies go into phases. Like, okay, it's like a dark psychological thing, but then it's going to go really crazy, and then it's going to go back to this. We'd see that happen from like mid scene and then go back again, and that I can see as being disorienting. But I think it did a really interesting. I think it again had some interesting characters in it, and all the craziness and all the scantily clad women and that are getting knifed, and some of the bad acting and some of the cheesiness and stuff like that. I think there was something really interesting here. Something I want to actually point out is that the Joel Wynkoop character of Dr. Hess, you're supposed to really feel bad for him and really be hoping. Actually, I like that there are very, until the end, there aren't really, even the killers, there aren't really a real villain in the piece.
Mm-hmm.
They're tragic figures. Dr. Hess is a tragic figure. This, God, I gotta just look at his name so I stop saying that guy. But whoever, I don't know, was it Johnny guy? You gotta help me out. Johnny, okay, Johnny. Johnny was a tragic figure. They were just tragic figures. They never quite lost it into full-blown, irredeemable mania like Mike did in the first film. I liked that. I thought that was interesting. There's a love scene that Joel Wynkoop has with his girlfriend or wife or whatever, and I actually applaud this scene for. This is me talking, for not being an exploitive scene. I liked that it was the presence of a broad notwithstanding, this was a very realistic scene, because let's face it, Joel Wynkoop does not look like Antonio Banderas, okay? He looks like an ordinary guy.
But that's the charm of Joel Wynkoop.
Exactly. He looks like an ordinary guy. These look like ordinary people. It didn't seem like it was like this weird Skinamax, passionate thing. It was a very simple scene of these two people reaching out and having this very human, intimate, realistic moment. I was really surprised by how that scene was shot. I'm like, that's not what you expect from a film called Screaming for Sanity, Truth or Dare 3, but it did it. And I liked how Ritter handled a lot of these characters in the film. It kind of goes off the rails at the end a bit for me. And I think that at least one of the twists was telegraphed as soon as you had this weird line of dialogue earlier in the film that sticks out like a sore thumb. But no, I still enjoyed this movie quite a bit. It was in danger of falling under its own weight, but I don't think it did.
Yeah, I wouldn't go so far to say that this isn't a movie worth watching by any means. I don't want to put that out there, because I do like this movie, but I do feel that final act, it gets a little too Hollywoody for me.
Well, there's a rescue. You got to rescue the kidnapped girlfriend, and that's and it's in an abandoned warehouse.
Yeah, it's a big finale where everything's getting resolved. There's a big battle where people are getting thrown through cardboard boxes and blah 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 blah.
And the exposition is flying.
Yeah.
Through the air.
Everyone's got to explain why they did everything.
Yeah, and there is at least one twist too many that this character that just came in out of the blue. There's a character that comes in out of the blue at the end. I'm like, yeah, that was a mistake. but yeah, so I can see that. But there's still enough of an edge, though. I mean, this person isn't just kidnapped and tied up; she's fucking crucified, for God's sakes. Oh my God! And then there's like this wonderful moment between Dr. Hess and Johnny, where they're trying to like this a big like what now moment, and I think that was handled well. So I think even that has enough going for it that I could forgive it if we did have the little chase scene rescue thing,
Yeah. Mark, ultimately, how'd you come out on this thing?
Well, I didn't enjoy it as much, and like I said, I watched 3 of these 4 back to back. I watched the first one by itself, but then I watched 2, 3, and 4 back to back. This one, I would say, out of the first 3, I probably enjoyed the least. I still enjoyed it, but compared to the other 2, I wasn't quite into it as the other 2 for me, because I think it felt just a little bit by the numbers in a lot of spots. I liked the message that it was going for. Again, the whole worship of bad guys and of serial killers, how people were in love with them because we were getting other similar, more mainstream movies about that same thing. So, I enjoyed all that, but out of the 3, I think I enjoyed this one not quite as much as the first 2. Although you do still get here once again his statement about the ineptitude of the medical profession.
Yes.
Because who in their right mind, what doctor would take a guy whose baby was killed by a serial killer and get him a job at Sunnydale Elementary School? I'm like, do you want the man to flog himself every night because he's just torturing himself because he's got to stare at kids he will never have again? I'm like, so that was a little jab, I think, still. But out of the 3, I this one probably, is not as enjoyable for me as the first 2.
Yeah, that's where I would go with this one as well, is that I really like the places that it goes. I like the story. I like the themes. It's a good continuation of Wicked Games, but ultimately that final act just kind of bogs this thing down for me. Like, it just builds to this point where we just watch a couple guys run around a warehouse for like 15 minutes. And some of the scenes at the end there are kind of cool, but I'm just not a big fan of, I'm the bad guy and I'm going to sit and tell you why I did everything endings.
Yeah.
It just does nothing for me at all. Scott?
It wasn't so much that, it was that then somebody else had to come in. Now, he had explored the idea of spoiler alert territory, guys. Spoiler alert in case you want to watch these movies, and I think you should.
This is a warning. Thank you.
He explored the idea of having multiple killers in the last movie, and he had to do it. I don't think he really needed to do that again in this movie, to have not just the mastermind, but also have the mastermind have a partner in crime that comes out of nowhere and adds nothing to the story. Double team murders were big around this time. I don't know if it was a reaction to the Scream thing or if he was just continuing on the theme of the last movie, but I could have done without that. Other than that, though, like I say, I liked the movie. I mean, I can see where, we're into some problem areas. None of these movies are perfect. I don't believe in perfect movies anyway. I kind of like even some of the flaws in the movies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and one of the issues we have to deal with in this movie is like, Mark is absolutely right, pointing out that it does touch upon bad medical people in the medical profession. Also, terrible cops again. I don't know if that was supposed to be the same character from the first movie that we saw. It was a different actor, I believe. But there's this one cop character who interrogates the Dr. Hess character and is just like the most inept, ridiculous, hot-headed cop you've ever seen, and I could have done without that entire sequence. But all the same, I still liked the movie. I liked the themes it was going with. I liked the unique twist it had on the killers in the movie. I think it was really clever how you had this kind of duality playing between the Dr. Hess character and the Johnny character, each of them dealing with their own potential psychological breakdowns, all thanks to to Mike. I mean, I love the fact that we have these four movies, and if they were just like going through the numbers, it would be Mike escaped from the mental hospital and he's killing again. None of these movies are like that. None of them are like that. Mike is the killer for the first movie. That's it. Then after that, it's all these people whose lives have been touched by this, who are now having to deal with the wreckage of it, and they are also dealing with their own issues. And I like that this film continued those themes, so I recommend this one. I think that Wicked Games and Scream for Sanity make a great pair, actually. I think these are two really well done shot on video films.
Yeah, of the shot on video fare, these movies take more chances than the vast majority of the stuff.
Yeah.
It's dealing with far more serious issues. It's dealing with a lot more psychological issues. I think the ideas and the themes break past what the budgetary restraints were for these films. And that's why I think these movies endure far longer than the vast majority of similar fare, is that these movies are just far more intelligent than the others. Now, does that mean that they're perfect? As you had said, I'm also of the thought of I don't like perfect. I don't know perfect movies. Every movie has its own little quirks, but I love these movies. I really like all of these movies. And this one, I will just say, is just not my favorite of the three. And if anything, I do believe it's a good companion piece with Wicked Games. So let's go ahead and move on to the last film of the night, not necessarily made in 2011, but released in 2011, Truth or Dare 4, Deadly Dares.
You want to play Truth or Dare?
All right, there.
Truth or Dare?
Now, Deadly Dares fast forwards to the present, the internet age, in which Our lead character, Turner Downing, is a man who gets fired from his job as a cyber journalist. And I say journalist with air quotes. He works for a company that essentially takes Associated Press headlines and rewrites the stories. He gets fired from this $9 an hour job. On his way home, his girlfriend dumps him because he's a boring, good for nothing, no ambition dude. And he gets a hold of his bud, who also works with him or worked with him, and proceeds to get drunk. And his bud introduces him to a website, Mikey's Deadly Dares, where people can go online, select somebody that they want to talk to, and play games of truth or dare. And by doing this, he ends up meeting a mysterious woman who pushes him to murder. So Deadly Dares fast forwards past all the Mike Strauber stuff for the most part, and tries to completely rewrite the script on what the Truth or Dare films are. I have, ever since I've seen this movie, we're talking almost 6 years now. I've always thought for a micro budget film that this was an extremely fresh, interesting way to reboot this series, which is essentially kind of what Deadly Dares is. It's taking from what came before it, certain elements of the Mike Strauber and the infamy of these murders and all this stuff, and set another story in that world without having to directly go off of the yarns we had just seen in the other movies. Mark, what did you think of this new direction with Deadly Dares?
I think was the proper way to go for it if you wanted to introduce this series to a new audience, to kind of give it an update. I liked that we didn't go, we're movie 4 here, and we didn't go back to, Mike again on this, though his influence does come up in it, which is fine. I like films like this who are trying to kind of reboot or take the series in another direction, and they may make a casual reference or there's an influence from the original film, but it's not, it's not a direct sequel, so to speak, as far as that storyline from the first one. So I dug it. I thought it was a good update. You're right. For when this came out, especially, it was, kind of ahead of what you see now with the internet and such, because it was it had footage in here of, from a website of people doing dares and that, and the way they shot it and stuff. That's the type of thing now you see almost commonplace, where people are looking for, shoot this short and we'll include it in this video, and here it's kind of a little bit ahead of that, of doing that, and yeah, overall, I liked it. I liked the direction they took. I thought it was a natural direction and where you would want to take a film if you wanted to modernize it for a new audience.
Yeah, especially for the audience that this film catered to. Now, all of the different videos that you saw within this film, Tim Ritter actually reached out to fans and said, hey, would you like to make your own Copperface Killer video or dare video? Send it in and it'll be part of this movie. So all of those scenes that you see on daretube.tv or daretube.com in this movie are from our fan submissions.
Oh, and that's cool. And it looked like it, and I'm glad he did that, because like I said, now that's something that's almost commonplace.
Absolutely. Again, Tim Ritter going well beyond the curve in the low budget, micro budget direct to video fare. Scott, how'd you come out on this one? Was this was a first time watch for you, wasn't it?
Yeah. Everything from two through 4 were first time watches for me, and I watched 3 and 4 back to back, and I think that what he did with the technology, a lot of times, even films that are these shot on video things and everything like that, they're a few years behind the times. This one was right on there because even though YouTube has been around for a very long time, I don't think sometimes I think we forget how long it's been around, but it's been around like a very long time. But the whole notion of YouTube stardom is something that just became more and more prevalent in the 2010s, really. You had a few before that, but I mean, it was kind of like seen as a fluke. Now this is an actual career path that people go on.
Yes.
And social media, of course, has exploded even more since then. And so I think this was a really clever take on it, and I knew that that's what he did for the DareTube submissions. And I think that was really clever because it starts out with the really mundane stuff. Starts out with somebody who's brushing her teeth with shampoo, and then by the end of it, we're watching murders, and it was I think that was very, very clever, and I think it was great to get the fans involved. He did touch upon this in the interview that you did before, and I was able to hear this part that enabled him with, I think, did he say he also kickstarted this? Did he say that?
He did crowdfund this slightly.
He did crowdfund this, and I think he said it had like a budget of like $5,000 or $6,000 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Or something.
It's still a low budget film.
Yeah, it's a very low budget, and I think that getting the fans involved and doing that was a great idea. Having said that, as clever as it was, this one didn't quite work for me. Honestly, I liked, because our focal point is this person again who's going through a psychological descent. His wife dumps him, and he's got all this problems, and then he sees this girl online, and he starts having this long-term internet relationship with her. That also a good touch, but it's so one-sided, where he's got to do all these crazy dares that go into murderous territory eventually.
She never has to do anything.
She never has to do anything. At this one time, it's like their quid pro quo is that he had to murder a guy, and she has to she-bop in front of him. That's about it. And the problem is that unlike the other movies where those films, first one a bit, I mentioned the first one drags a bit. There's a little bit too much padding and stuff. But the other film, none of these films ever kind of got dull. They never got boring. This one, I'm like, okay, you guys can speed this up a bit. It seemed to take forever because it was such a slower descent and everything like that. And while I like movies that take their time sometimes, it didn't need to take this much time. And especially when you could see where this was going. And even the twist, there's a big twist at the end. There's two twists, and the final twist is, again, there's a line of dialogue earlier where I'm like, I made sure to I made a note of it. I'm like, why would that line be there? I think I know and you're not sure that that's where it's going, but it tries to do the twisty turny thing towards the end and everything like that, but which is kind of nice. But by that point, it's a little bit too little, too late for me. There's just other parts of the movie that I had issues with. I had issues with the one big murder scene in the movie, which is like him killing his former boss. It turns out that, again, spoiler alert, guys, spoiler.
This is a warning. Thank you.
I'm serious. I think people should watch the movie still, even if I didn't care for this one. I think people should watch it. Is that when it turns out that the boss is also who's a much more prolific serial killer and has gotten away with it. Now, if you go with the end, with how it turns out at the end, you can kind of make an excuse for this, but it's still it seems like way too out of left field, even for this movie, which is up to that point taking a much, much more serious approach than the other movies. And that one was a tonal shift that was just way too much. So, I mean, it's not like I thought that this movie was a total piece of garbage. Oh, I hate it. No, I feel like there's a lot of really clever ideas, especially he has a lot of clever ideas about the internet age and everything like that. And how people can when they're unemployed and they're single, they can slip into isolation and kind of lose themselves in this online world and feel like they're in, and certain like social media things can make them feel like they're more powerful than they actually are. That's a totally legit thing to tackle.
It absolutely
Good
is
for you, man. And I just don't think that it quite. I applaud him for tackling that theme. I just don't think it quite makes it. That's my only problem. It just didn't quite do it. It just didn't quite click for me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I have to completely disagree with you.
I thought you might.
I love this movie. I really think next to part one, this is my next favorite of the series.
Wow.
I really do, because I think compared to the last two that we had watched, it's a far more linear film. I think the production quality is quite high for the budget that it has. It's a far more cinematic film than any of the other ones other than part one. So it kind of makes that leap where you have to kind of get beyond the technical aspects of the film that much easier for you to just jump right into this thing. I think if any of the movies I would recommend to just a normal horror audience, Deadly Dares might be the one I might recommend to them right off the bat, because it just, there's a very easy bar of entry for this movie just from a technical aspect alone. I think for a micro budget film, the performances across the board are actually pretty damn good. Especially, and we won't get too much into the drama that happened with this actress after this movie came out in her own Truth or Dare movie and all this nonsense, but Jessica Cameron is actually pretty convincing in this movie.
Yeah, I was surprised to see her in this movie since she did another movie called that.
Well, if you want to get into that, we can get into that, but for what we're doing right now, we'll maybe toward the end, we'll sit and talk about that a little bit. But she was playing the kind of the femme fatale, the succubus of the film, if it were. She was really convincing. I think Casey Miracle. The only part of this that kind of drags it down a little bit is that I think the VO is a little too monotone, where it just kind of felt after a while.
The noir voiceover.
Yes.
I just thought there was too much of it. I liked that it was there, and I think it really gave you a good glimpse into his head. I just thought there was way too much of it.
That could very well be, but just in general, I really enjoyed the story. I like where it went. I like the themes that it was touching on. I thought editorially it was doing a lot of very interesting things, jumping between different footage stocks and then going back to the more cinematic look. And then as it built toward the end, I really enjoy this movie from just a pretty basic, like, this is just a kind of a normal horror film. This isn't some weird twisty turny kind of non-linear thing that we've been used to the last couple movies. So I thought, this one's a real breeze to sit through. Mark, what did you think of this thing?
Yeah, it is the most linear out of the ones we've watched in the series up until this point. And I would say if you got your casual horror fan or your quote unquote modern horror fan, they could watch this because the themes still apply today. And I will say, as I've read online in some articles and such, it's not far from the truth that in those cyber relationships that one side does a lot more for very little payment from the other side, for lack of a better term. So that I don't think they're actually off on that. I think he was trying to make a point with that and how dumb the guy was being in many ways.
He's following his dick. His dick.
Yeah, that was his whole point. Was this guy? She was so, that it wasn't even dawning on him after a while that so she was making a statement on that. But yeah, for me, I enjoyed it, and I thought it was a decent modern update. I wasn't expecting it to be what it was. I thought almost, we're going to revisit, the Mike character again in the story, but that barely came up. But he does address other themes in here, especially the internet popularity thing, which now, like you guys said, that's very topical yet. And this film was made, a number of years ago, yet this film is very topical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one of the things that didn't necessarily 100% make the cut, there's multiple versions of this because I know this personally because Tim and I were in contact about me possibly coming on the team and helping him cut an HD version of this movie back in the day. And it just never happened due to scheduling and stuff like that. But I know he had a lot of troubles with editors working on this movie. And there are multiple cuts, but they actually reshot the original short they had in Twisted Illusions, the Truth or Dare short with Joel Wynkoop and another person.
Oh, yeah.
I was going to ask about that. Why, when they showed the flashback, why was it new footage with new actors? I mean, didn't he have the rights to it?
That is a question I would like to ask him that I don't believe I've ever gotten an answer to. I bet you it is. It can't be licensing because I believe Ron Bonk releases that stuff.
So I was confused. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, unless he couldn't. He wanted to reshoot it because he shot the original on film, and this one wasn't, and he maybe didn't have either the footage anymore or the transfer properly, and he wanted it to match as far as quality, maybe. Yeah, because that threw me off too, that the original scenes we kind of got are reshot. I'm like, okay, and I just figured it was a licensing or a rights issue, or that he just couldn't get the permissions to use it. But maybe it was the fact he didn't have an original or couldn't make the quality match, so maybe he chose not to. That'd be a great question to ask him, because I was curious about that too.
Right. Well, it also could be that this is sort of a soft reboot.
Right.
Just go ahead and just reshoot everything, that maybe this was being pushed out there a little more towards people that weren't as familiar with the series. So using old footage that necessarily hasn't been restored at all at that time, maybe just didn't look right with the rest of the stuff that he was shooting. So, and that was one of the things that jump out at me right away was the quality of the photography. In some of the submissions, I gotta say, some of the killing stuff and some of the masks were pretty cool. Like the dude that's running around with the gold tin mask with the axe.
Yeah.
After the girl, I loved that sequence. Maybe not so much the dude who had cut out a cardboard mask.
Yeah,
there were some.
The guy chasing the girl with the axe was probably my favorite of those, because I'm just like, oh, dude, that's cool. I want to see more of that, Or
it was kind of intense. It was actually like a pretty in your face kind of horror sequence.
Yeah, it was a bit brutal too. I mean, you had gore effects in that whole sequence as well, and but then you get a little bit of a humor, like what we were talking about earlier, where you get the mundane ones in the beginning, where they pull out a can of dog food and they labeled it Dr. Ritter's. Dr. Ritter's organic dog food, which is it's on the label.
I have to admit, Mark, when that thing came on, I had to do a double take and squint to the screen, because for like a split second, I thought that was you.
In the picture,
I'm like, I know that the Astro Radio Z is in tight with Ritter. I didn't know it was like this tight. Oh wait, no, it's not him. That's an older guy. Okay.
You're in Deadly Dare, Truth or Dare 4. I didn't realize this, Mark the movie.
I am visually impaired, as I mentioned. But
I didn't realize this
like
either.
For a split second, I'm like, holy shit, Mark. Oh no, Mark.
You got anything to say to that, Mark?
I you know what? Dog food tastes like pate. I'll just say that.
Jesus. I think anything that's really missing in this movie compared to the previous three is gore.
Yeah.
This is a fairly bloodless affair.
Except for the submissions, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say that you get more gore in the submissions than you did. That's why at first I thought maybe the submissions were shot all by him as well, because you had more gore in those shots than you did in the actual killing.
It's not a very bloody movie, you know. I mean, how many people does our main guy actually kill in the movie? Not nearly as much as our other, legacy of truth or dare killers.
Right. I don't think the story called for it.
No, it didn't. Again, one of my complaints was that it took too long to get to this point, and it was the film was underwhelming for me for a number of reasons. But no, it was a much more focused story. Let's say that.
Mm-hmm.
It was more focused on this one guy, this one guy's problems, this one guy's issue, and part of that was, him just becoming this person, whereas the becoming would be the first 20 minutes of one of the other movies. it was the full 100 minutes of this movie.
Yeah Well, I kind of, after 3 movies of just batshit crazy whodunit switcheroo stuff, it was kind of nice to just watch kind of a breezy horror flick.
Okay. No, I can totally see that. Yeah.
I think the horror though that comes into this one, and Scotty, I know you post a lot online, and Derek, you do of course as well. But for me, especially being involved a lot on YouTube, the horror is I'm watching the parts where people are getting into it and doing the submissions of the dare, and I'm like, we're half a step away from seeing people do this. I could easily see this. And that for me was the scariest part, because I'm watching this going, you see a lot of trends that start up that are video trends, people setting themselves on fire, people, putting balloons over their head. I mean, so I'm watching this going, we're only half a step away from this actually being a trend where people just up their dares. I could see that happening. And for me, that was the scary part, is I'm watching this going, yeah, you know what? You're not far off.
Well, yeah, it's that whole idea of people trying to make a name for themselves, and what's the easiest ways to just outdo the next person. And obviously, we're not going to see a bunch of people trying to kill off a bunch of people to get famous on YouTube or anything like that. But it's definitely a metaphor for that whole pursuit of stardom. So this movie isn't too far off of reality. So I would say, and I know I kind of already said it a little bit, this might be my second favorite of the entire series. There's just something about this movie that it gets me, and I enjoy it. Just flies by. I absolutely love this one. Mark, what would you have to say? Final thoughts?
Yeah, I would say I still like the first one the best, but this one and 2 are almost tied as far as how much I enjoyed them. I enjoyed them for different reasons. They are still different films, and that's what I liked about this whole series, is the fact that each one of these films, though they have similar elements, you see the filmmaker trying to do something new and at least a little different, bring something different to the table. And I always give props for filmmakers trying to do that, rather than going a very easy route of just making the same stuff we've always seen. And even Truth or Dare 4, while it is a little bit more we talked about a little more linear, a little more in line, this film still is different than the other 3. So you still see the filmmaker here trying something new.
Scotty D, you kind of already said your piece on this. You have anything else you want to add?
No, just to reiterate that despite my misgivings about the film and that it just didn't make it for me as a whole, it's an interesting film. It's an intriguing film, and I think he was right on point with how, he was right on point handling the very thing most filmmakers can't do right, which is whenever they have to get topical regarding the internet, they either do something so hokey or so outside the realm of reality. And this one actually kind of seemed really plausible, the themes he was tackling and how he chose to do that. I thought that was really clever. Like I said, I liked how he brought the fans in and everything like that. I just didn't think that the narrative structure of the film, I just didn't feel like it really made it for me.
That's kind of how I felt about the last one, but
yeah, there you go.
That's cool. So that's it for this. I'm not really sure if I want to get into the controversy surrounding the main actress and
that's okay.
In her own version, because I just don't want to get popped to it. I really don't. Because of my association with Truth or Dare 4 and the people that were involved in making that film in a very limited capacity. I know a little more than I should. Well, there it is, folks. There's our talk on the Truth or Dare series. As I've said for many years, I'm a huge fan of these movies, and this was probably the episode I was most excited to get to of these shot on video ones. Even though I said my favorite shot on video film was the last one we did, Redneck Zombies, Truth or Dare, Critical Madness, Wicked Games, Screaming for Sanity, and now Deadly Dares are kind of the reason I'm into these movies. I grew up watching these movies. I watched them many times. I watched Creep many times. I've watched Killing Spree more times than I care to admit. And ultimately, it drove me to get in touch with Tim Ritter and finding out what an amazing guy that guy is. It's just, I love this series and I love these films. So I urge every one of you that haven't watched any of these movies, please go out, do yourself a favor. You're a fan of these shot on video movies, go watch these movies. They're a hell of a lot of fun. Even the lesser ones are still interesting and head and shoulders above the vast majority of direct to video, direct to streaming direct. So please go check these movies out. This is the portion of the show, of course, where my guests shamelessly shill the fuck out of you. So let's get to the shilling, goddammit. Mark the Movie Man shill.
Specialmarkproductions.com has links there to the Spoiler Room podcast, as well as the latest reviews I do on my YouTube channel. There's also a link to the work I do for We Live Film Horror Thursdays. I'm also going to have a couple of written reviews up there. I occasionally do those for We Live Film. You can also find me on the Twitters at SpecialMarkPro, and also occasionally on Galactic Netcasts when they do the Galactic Radio News Show. So I'm a little all over the place.
That is for sure, Mr. Scotty D.
Well, you can catch me here on Astro Radio Z. You can catch me on Mark's show from time to time. And you can also check me out on movieocrity.com, and then check out my web series at vimeo.com/movieocrity.
Well, folks, we are going to be going back to the Divine Well next week with Paul Bartel's Lust in the Dust. Yes, I'm bringing the John Waters crew back, and we're going to watch a weird Western. And that's the only way I could really put it. So until that episode, take care.
All I wanted was somebody to believe in me. I feel so empty.
You can find Astro Radio Z on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, Google Play, YouTube, and anywhere podcasts are found. Please help us by subscribing, rating the show, and giving us a review. It helps us get the show out to more listeners. Also, if you would like to hear more of the show and be a more active participant, Join the Astro Radio Z Facebook group and page, and join the Patreon. For only $1 a month, you get bonus episodes. Thank you for listening. See you next week, Astro Zombies.
He's got a critical madness from being places none of us should go. With love's strong, gentle hand, he could have made a stand, but now a critical madness has taken him away from me. If you look within his soul, you will see the teenage boy that needed faith and caring. Now he's alone, and all his days are void of warmth and sharing. Left alone to face his life without the guidance young men often seek. Now he's walking through a maze, so unprepared he could have